The discovery. Rena hadn't expected to make history during her first rotation at the Galactic Classification Bureau. As a junior data analyst from the crystalline species of Luminara, she had been content organizing survey reports and updating planetary databases. But that changed when she noticed an anomaly in the Earth file. She floated closer to her workstation, her crystalline form catching the artificial light as she examined the numbers again. The statistics couldn't be right. According to the latest atmospheric composition analysis, Earth's nitrogen-oxygen mixture should have been lethal to most carbon-based life forms. The pressure variations alone would have crushed most species. Administrator Vex, she called out, her voice tingling like wind chimes. Could you verify something for me? The massive form of her supervisor, a Zentran with multiple appendages and eyes, glided over. What seems to be the problem, Junior Analyst Rena? I've been cross-referencing Earth's environmental data with our standard classification metrics, and... She paused, double-checking her calculations. According to these readings, Earth should be classified as a Class 13 Deathworld. Vex's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession. That's impossible. Humans live there. Exactly. But look at these readings. Rena projected a holographic display of Earth's environmental data. Extreme temperature variations, frequent natural disasters, aggressive predators, toxic plants, and the oceans. She shuddered, her crystalline form vibrating with anxiety. The oceans contain creatures larger than our transport ships. Vex's tentacles curled inward, a sign of deep concern. Run a full diagnostic. This could be a system error. But it wasn't. After 3 complete scans and verification from the central quantum computer, the results remained unchanged. Earth, home to humanity, was officially the most dangerous inhabited planet in known space. The news spread through the Bureau like a quantum wave collapse. Within hours, the entire complex was buzzing with activity. Scientists, bureaucrats, and security officials gathered in emergency meetings. The implications were staggering. Do you realize what this means? Dr. Nexus, the Bureau's chief xenobiologist, addressed the hastily assembled committee. His insectoid form trembled with excitement or fear, no one could quite tell which. We've been interacting with Deathworld survivors for centuries without realizing it. In the corner of the room, Security Chief Zara, a towering Pyronian whose body emanated controlled plasma, spoke up. This explains so much about their behavior. Their obsession with extreme sports, their ability to survive in almost any environment, their casual approach to danger. Their consumption of capsaicin for pleasure, someone added, drawing nervous laughter from the crowd. But beneath the awkward humor lay a deeper concern. Humans had emerged from conditions that should have made complex life impossible. They had not only survived but had built civilizations, developed advanced technology, and joined the galactic community, all while considering their lethal environment normal. The implications sent ripples of unease through the assembled aliens. If humans considered their death world normal, what did that make them? What other capabilities had they developed without anyone noticing? Rena watched as her simple data analysis transformed into a galactic security concern. She had only been doing her job, reviewing and updating classifications. Now she found herself at the center of what might become the biggest revelation in recent galactic history. We need to inform the Galactic Council, Administrator Vex announced, his tentacles now wrapped tightly around his torso. This changes everything we thought we knew about human capabilities and potential. As the meeting dispersed, Rena returned to her workstation, her crystalline form dimmed with worry. She pulled up the human diplomatic files, reading through them with new eyes. All those polite exchanges, trade agreements, and cultural programs, they had all been conducted without understanding a fundamental truth about their human counterparts. They weren't just another spacefaring species. They were survivors of conditions that would kill most sentient beings in minutes. And they had emerged from their lethal cradle not with fear or trauma, but with curiosity and enthusiasm. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. And it all started with a junior analyst who decided to double-check some numbers. Panic in the Council. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so chaotic. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the spiral-shaped amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and transliterated speech. At the center of it all stood High Counselor JYX, her bioluminescent form pulsing with stress patterns as she attempted to maintain order. Silence. Her command reverberated through the neural translators, finally bringing the chamber to a semblance of order. We will address this situation with the dignity befitting the Galactic Council. The situation in question was displayed on the massive holographic projection floating above the chamber, Earth's new classification report. The data that junior analyst Rena had discovered had been verified by 12 independent research institutions across the galaxy. First to speak was Ambassador Krill of the Mechanoid Collective, his chrome-plated form reflecting the chamber's lights. This reclassification is preposterous. My species has maintained a trading outpost on Earth for 50 standard cycles. While the environment is challenging, it hardly qualifies as a death world. With respect, Ambassador, Dr. Nexus interjected, his mandibles clicking rapidly, your species inhabits artificial bodies. You don't experience the environment as organic beings do. From the upper tiers, Representative Locks of the gaseous nebulans released a cloud of concerned pheromones. Have we considered the psychological implications? A species evolved under such constant environmental pressure must have developed unprecedented survival instincts. The chamber erupted again, this time with speculation about human capabilities. Stories that had once seemed like amusing anomalies suddenly took on new significance. Last cycle, a human diplomat visited my world, announced Delegate Sphere, a rolling crystalline being. When our atmospheric regulators malfunctioned, instead of seeking emergency shelter like the rest of us, she helped repair the system. In acid rain. While making jokes. Similar accounts began pouring in from across the chamber. Humans working in radiation zones with minimal protection. Humans treating potentially lethal injuries as minor inconveniences. Humans deliberately seeking out dangerous situations for what they called entertainment. High Counselor JYX's bioluminescence shifted to a pattern indicating deep concern. We need to approach this methodically. First, we must determine if humans are aware of their world's true classification. And if they're not, someone called out. Then we must decide whether to inform them, JYX responded, her patterns flickering uncertainly. Security Chief Zara, newly arrived from the Classification Bureau, stepped forward. Her plasma form cast dancing shadows across the chamber walls. There's another consideration. If Earth is a Class 13 death world, then every human colony, every human space station, every human-designed habitat is potentially underestimating environmental risks for other species. This observation sent a new wave of anxiety through the assembly. Humans had been designing and building structures across the galaxy, all calibrated to what they considered safe parameters. We need a full review of all human-designed environmental systems, Ambassador Krill declared, his mechanical voice carrying an unusual note of concern. And we need it immediately. What we need, corrected Dr. Nexus, is to understand how they survived at all. The evolutionary pressures required to produce a species capable of thriving in such conditions, it defies everything we know about biological development. High Counselor JYX raised all four of her appendages, calling for attention. We will establish 3 immediate task forces. The first will review all human-designed infrastructure across governed space. The second will investigate the full implications of Earth's reclassification. And the third. She paused, her bioluminescence dimming slightly, will determine how to approach this diplomatically with the human representatives. As if summoned by her words, the chamber doors parted to admit Ambassador James Harrison, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. The human walked in casually, seemingly oblivious to the tension his presence created. Sorry I'm late, he said cheerfully, taking his seat. Had to wait out a small solar flare during my shuttle ride. Nothing serious. The chamber fell silent as 1,000 alien species stared at the human who had just casually dismissed radiation exposure that would have killed most of them. High Counselor JYX's bioluminescence shifted to a pattern that had no direct translation, but roughly approximated to, "Oh dear." The galaxy was about to change, and nobody was quite sure if they were ready for it. The investigation. Dr. Thrix adjusted the environmental controls of his protective suit for the third time in as many minutes. The arachnid xenobiologist had prepared extensively for this mission to Earth, but no amount of preparation could have readied him for the reality of standing on a Class 13 Deathworld. Atmospheric pressure stable, but these temperature variations are remarkable, he chittered into his recorder, all 8 eyes focusing on the readings. We've experienced a 5-degree shift in the last hour alone. Beside him, senior observer Lyra of the Aquatic Consensus floated in her liquid-filled containment sphere, her tentacles wrapping nervously around her navigation controls. The local humans call this spring weather, she noted, her translator conveying her disbelief. The investigation team had landed in what humans called Minnesota, chosen for its supposedly mild conditions. They were accompanied by their human liaison, Park Ranger Thomas Reed, who watched their careful measurements and constant environmental monitoring with poorly concealed amusement. "You folks might want to wrap this up soon," Thomas mentioned casually, checking his primitive wrist-mounted timepiece. "Storm's coming." "Storm?" The third member of their team, energy specialist Helios, pulsed with concern, his gaseous form swirling inside his containment field. "What classification of storm?" Thomas squinted at the horizon. "Nothing major. Just some thunderstorms. Bit of lightning, maybe some hail." The alien researchers exchanged glances through their various protective barriers. They had studied Earth's weather patterns extensively during their preparation. What humans classified as nothing major would qualify as a natural disaster on most civilized worlds. "Perhaps we should return to our ship," Dr. Thrix suggested, his mandibles clicking anxiously. "Oh, no need," Thomas replied cheerfully. "The observation station is just up ahead. Perfect place to watch the storm roll in." Before any of them could protest, a loud rumbling shook the air. Dr. Thrix's instruments immediately began screaming warnings about atmospheric disturbance and electrical discharge risks. "Fascinating," Lyra observed, her tentacles pressing against her containment sphere. "The humans have built structures specifically to observe these deadly phenomena." The observation station turned out to be a simple wooden structure, elevated above the ground. Thomas led them inside just as the first drops of rain began to fall. The alien researchers huddled in their protective equipment, watching in horror as the sky turned an ominous green-black. "This is incredible," Helios whispered, his gaseous form condensing slightly in awe. "The electrical discharges contain enough energy to power a small city, and they're just happening randomly all around us." Thomas had made them some of the human stimulant known as coffee, a substance that the team had already classified as a mild neurotoxin. They watched as he sipped it calmly while literal bolts of plasma split the sky outside. "You know," Thomas said conversationally, as a particularly loud thunder crack made Dr. Thrix's exoskeleton rattle, "my daughter's school is having their spring outdoor education week next month. They'll be camping out here, learning about local wildlife." "Camping?" Lyra's translator struggled with the concept. "You mean deliberately sleeping outdoors? With minimal protection? And children?" "Oh yeah, kids love it. Though last year they had to cut it short because of a bear." The research team's collective horror must have been evident, even across species barriers, because Thomas quickly added, "Don't worry, nobody got hurt. The bear was just curious about their snacks." Dr. Thrix made a mental note to update their report. Somehow, the fact that humans casually exposed their young to such conditions was even more shocking than the environmental readings. As the storm raged on, the team continued their observations, both of the weather and their human guide. Thomas moved about the station with complete ease, occasionally pointing out interesting cloud formations or particularly impressive lightning strikes as if he were showing them a collection of harmless curiosities. "You have to understand," Dr. Thrix said finally, unable to contain his scientific curiosity, "on most worlds, any one of these conditions, the electrical storms, the temperature variations, the presence of large predators, would be considered an emergency situation." Thomas laughed. "Wait until winter. Now that's when it gets interesting." The three researchers fell into stunned silence, their various instruments continuing to record the ongoing storm. Their mission was supposed to verify Earth's Deathworld classification, but they were beginning to realize they had underestimated the scope of their task. It wasn't just the planet that defied their understanding, it was the humans themselves. Their casual acceptance of conditions that should have triggered evacuation protocols, their ability to not just survive but thrive in an environment that violated dozens of galactic safety regulations. As another lightning bolt illuminated the sky, Dr. Thrix realized their report would need to address not just the environmental conditions, but the psychological implications of evolving on such a world. The galaxy wasn't just dealing with a death world, they were dealing with a species that found comfort in chaos. Would you like me to continue with part 4? We're building towards the climax while maintaining the theme of humanity's unique relationship with their dangerous environment. Hidden strengths. The investigation team's report to the Galactic Council was interrupted by what the humans called a minor earthquake. As the ground trembled beneath the San Francisco Conference Center, Dr. Thrix watched in amazement as the human attendees barely reacted, continuing their conversations while casually holding onto their beverages. "As you can see," he chittered into his presentation unit, all 8 legs braced against the shaking floor, "this exemplifies our findings. What we consider a geological emergency, they view as a mere inconvenience." The assembled council members, attending via holographic projection for their own safety, watched in stunned silence as a human server calmly walked through the conference room, balancing a tray of drinks while the building swayed. "Our 3-month investigation has revealed something far more significant than Earth's environmental hazards," Senior Observer Lyra continued, her containment sphere automatically adjusting to the tremors. "It's the human response to these conditions that truly defines their death world classification." The presentation shifted to their documented observations. Humans surfing on violent ocean waves. Running for recreation in temperatures that would cause heat stroke in most species. Voluntarily climbing frozen mountains with minimal protective gear. This morning, energy specialist Helios added, his gaseous form swirling excitedly, "I witnessed a human child's educational program about something they call Volcano Science Camp. They take their young to active volcanic sites for learning purposes." The council's collective shock was palpable even through their holographic representations. High Counselor JYX's bioluminescence had shifted to a previously unrecorded pattern of distress. "But perhaps most remarkable," Dr. Thrix continued, "is their capacity for what they call adaptation. During our study, we observed humans casually operating in environments ranging from sub-zero temperatures to desert conditions exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, often within the same week. The ground's trembling finally subsided, and a human safety official casually announced that it was just a 4.2 before returning to his seat. Several council members visibly flinched at this dismissal of seismic activity. "We've also discovered something unexpected," Lyra added, bringing up new data. "Humans don't merely survive these conditions, they actively seek them out. They have entire industries built around what they call extreme sports and adventure tourism." The presentation showed footage of humans deliberately jumping from high altitudes with minimal safety equipment, diving into predator-infested waters, and racing vehicles at physiologically dangerous speeds. "During our investigation," Helios reported, "we visited something called a hot sauce competition. Humans deliberately consume capsaicin concentrations that would be classified as chemical weapons on most worlds. For entertainment." Ambassador Harrison, Earth's representative, sat in the corner sipping what the team had identified as extra spicy Bloody Mary while watching the presentation with apparent amusement. "But here's what's truly remarkable," Dr. Thrick said, bringing up their final analysis. "All of these seemingly death-defying behaviors are considered normal in human culture. Their young are taught to see challenges as opportunities. Their entertainment media consistently portrays the conquering of deadly conditions as inspirational." The presentation shifted to their psychological analysis. "Humans have evolved not just physical resilience, but a unique psychological approach to danger. They don't just survive their death world, they embrace it. They've developed a cultural and biological framework that turns lethal conditions into what they call exciting opportunities." As if to emphasize their point, a human child outside the conference center windows was riding something called a skateboard, deliberately launching herself into the air and landing on a metal rail. Several council members had to look away. In conclusion, Lyra stated, her tentacles gesturing expressively, Earth's Class 13 Death World classification isn't just about the planet's conditions. It's about the species those conditions produced, a species that views our safety protocols as suggestions, our environmental hazards as challenges, and our deadly conditions as merely interesting. The room fell into contemplative silence, broken only by Ambassador Harrison casually asking if anyone wanted to join him for something called skydiving after the meeting. The fact that half the room didn't immediately realize this meant voluntarily jumping from a high-altitude aircraft said everything about the gulf between human and alien perspectives. A new understanding. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly stretched into its third day. Representatives from across known space debated the implications of humanity's death world origins, while humans themselves continued their daily routines, blissfully unaware of the cosmic revelation they had inspired. First speaker Quantum, a being of pure energy and thought, addressed the assembly. "We've spent centuries misunderstanding our human allies. What we saw as reckless behavior was simply Tuesday for them." In the observation gallery, Dr. Thrix, Lyra, and Helios watched as their research sparked a fundamental shift in galactic politics. Their investigation had revealed more than just Earth's environmental extremes, it had exposed the galaxy's own preconceptions. "Consider their space program," Ambassador Krill of the Mechanoid Collective announced, displaying historical footage. "While we developed careful, automated exploration systems, humans strapped themselves to primitive chemical rockets and hurled themselves into space. Not because it was safe, but because it was there." The assembly murmured as they watched grainy footage of early human space flight. The safety protocols would have violated every regulation in the galaxy. Yet the humans in the footage were smiling. "Their adaptation capabilities extend beyond the physical," senior observer Lyra added, her tentacles weaving patterns of emphasis. "In the 3 months we spent on Earth, we documented humans thriving in conditions that would require extensive terraforming for any other species. The evidence was undeniable. Humans had built cities in deserts, in Arctic regions, in areas prone to tornadoes, and on fault lines. They had settlements in places where the air was thin enough to impair cognitive function, yet they played sports at those elevations. Perhaps most importantly, energy specialist Helios pulsed, they've maintained their adaptive drive even after achieving spaceflight. While other species seek to control their environment, humans adapt themselves to any environment they encounter." The implications were staggering. Every human colony, every space station, every frontier settlement took on new significance. Humans weren't just surviving in these places, they were innovating, exploring, pushing boundaries that other species hadn't even recognized as boundaries. Ambassador Harrison stood to address the assembly, his casual posture a stark contrast to the formal bearing of other representatives. "Look," he said, "we understand this is a lot to process. Finding out your neighbors evolved on a death world probably isn't easy. But maybe this understanding can lead to something positive." He gestured to a holographic display of joint human-alien projects across the galaxy. "Where you see deadly conditions, we see challenges to overcome. Where you see insurmountable obstacles, we see opportunities to adapt and grow. Maybe that's exactly what this galaxy needs. The assembly fell silent, considering his words. The humans' Deathworld origins hadn't made them aggressive conquerors or hardened survivors. Instead, it had produced a species that faced the impossible with innovation and even enthusiasm. First speaker Quantum's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. Perhaps this revelation isn't about fear or caution. Perhaps it's about potential. The humans have shown us that adaptation isn't just about survival, it's about thriving in conditions we never thought possible. As the assembly debated, news was already spreading across the galaxy. But something unexpected was happening. Instead of panic, there was fascination. Instead of fear, there was curiosity. Species that had once viewed humans as reckless began to see them as inspirational. They make the impossible seem achievable, Dr. Thrix noted, watching the proceedings. Not because they're fearless, but because they've evolved to see challenges differently than we do. The Galactic Assembly eventually reached a historic decision. Earth's Deathworld classification would remain, but it would carry a new designation, Cradle of Adaptive Innovation. The human's unique relationship with extreme conditions would be recognized not as a threat, but as a valuable perspective in galactic society. As the assembly concluded, Ambassador Harrison approached the research team with a grin. So, now that all this is settled, who's up for some volcano diving? I know this great spot on Hawaii. The researchers exchanged glances, their various containment systems humming nervously. But there was something different now, a spark of curiosity where fear had once been. After all, if humans could treat a death world like home, maybe the rest of the galaxy could learn to see the universe a little differently too. In the end, Earth's death world status didn't isolate humanity from the galactic community, it helped forge a deeper understanding between species. The galaxy had gained more than just an explanation for human behavior, it had gained a new perspective on what was possible. And somewhere on Earth, oblivious to their newfound status as death world survivors, humans continued doing what they did best, turning challenges into adventures, one impossible feat at a time.